If you've ever stood in line at a deli staring at a menu wondering whether to order pastrami or corned beef, you're not alone. They look similar, they're both made from beef, and they're often piled high on sandwiches. But somehow they taste completely different. So what actually sets them apart? Is it the cut of meat, the seasoning, the way they're cooked? Today we're breaking down the real difference between pastrami and corned beef, where they come from, how they're made, and why your taste buds can instantly tell them apart, right here on History of Simple Things. To understand the difference, we have to go back in time to different parts of Europe. Corned beef traces its roots to countries like Ireland and England, where preserving meat with large grains of salt, called corns, was a common method before refrigeration. That's actually where the name corned beef comes from, those coarse salt crystals used in the curing process. Pastrami, on the other hand, has origins in Romania. It evolved from a traditional meat preservation method called pastrama, where meat was cured, seasoned, and often smoked to extend its shelf life. Jewish immigrants brought both techniques with them when they moved to places like New York in the late 1800s. Over time, these methods adapted to local tastes and ingredients, eventually becoming deli staples in the United States. So while they share similar preservation roots, pastrami and corned beef took slightly different evolutionary paths. One of the first key differences lies in the cut of beef used. Corned beef is typically made from brisket, specifically the flat cut. Brisket comes from the lower chest of the cow, and it's known for being tough but flavorful when cooked properly. Pastrami can also be made from brisket, but it's more commonly made from the navel cut, which comes from the belly area of the cow. This cut is fattier than brisket, which gives pastrami its richer, more indulgent flavor. Some modern versions even use other cuts like round, but traditional pastrami leans toward that fattier profile. So right away, you're dealing with two slightly different starting points, and that affects everything that follows. Both pastrami and corned beef start with curing, but the details matter. Corned beef is cured in a brine, a mixture of water, salt, and spices. This process can take several days, allowing the meat to absorb flavor and preserve itself. The spices often include things like peppercorns, bay leaves, mustard seeds, and sometimes sugar for balance. Pastrami also begins with a curing stage, often very similar to corned beef. In fact, pastrami is sometimes described as a second life for corned beef because the initial curing process can be nearly identical. But here's where things start to diverge. After curing, pastrami gets coated in a bold spice rub. This is one of its defining features. The rub usually includes crushed black pepper, coriander seeds, garlic, and other spices that create a thick, flavorful crust on the outside of the meat. Corned beef, by contrast, doesn't get this heavy spice coating. Its flavor comes mainly from the brine itself, making it milder and more straightforward. This is why pastrami often tastes more complex and peppery, while corned beef has a cleaner, saltier profile. Now, we get to one of the biggest differences, how they're cooked. Corned beef is typically boiled or simmered. It's cooked slowly in water, which keeps it tender and juicy. This method also draws out some of the saltiness, balancing the flavor. That's why corned beef is often served with cabbage and potatoes. It's part of a classic boiled meal. Pastrami, however, goes through an extra step: smoking. After curing and seasoning, the meat is smoked at a low temperature. This adds a deep, smoky flavor that you simply won't find in corned beef. After smoking, pastrami is usually steamed to make it tender before slicing. So while corned beef is boiled, pastrami is smoked and then steamed, giving it a much more layered flavor. All these differences come together in the final bite. Corned beef is tender, juicy, and slightly salty with a mild spice background. It's soft and easy to slice, often falling apart if cooked long enough. Pastrami, on the other hand, has a firmer texture with a noticeable crust on the outside. The inside is still tender, but the spice rub and smoking process give it a bold, savory, slightly smoky taste with a peppery kick. If corned beef is comforting and simple, pastrami is bold and attention-grabbing. You'll often find both meats in sandwiches, but even here their personalities shine through. Corned beef is famously used in dishes like corned beef and cabbage or sliced thin in a classic sandwich, often paired with mustard. It's also a key ingredient in the Reuben sandwich, along with sauerkraut, Swiss cheese, and rye bread. Pastrami is also a deli favorite, especially piled high on rye bread with mustard. Because of its stronger flavor, it tends to stand out more in sandwiches and doesn't need as many additional ingredients to shine. In some delis, you'll even see both offered side by side, letting customers choose between mild and bold. So, which one is better? This really comes down to personal taste. If you prefer something milder, saltier, and more traditional, corned beef might be your go-to. If you like smoky, spicy, and more complex flavors, pastrami is probably the winner. Interestingly, because pastrami builds on the same curing process as corned beef, you can think of it as a more upgraded or layered version. But that doesn't make it better, just different. So, the next time you're at a deli deciding between pastrami and corned beef, you'll know exactly what sets them apart. It's not just about the meat, it's about history, preparation, and technique. One is cured and boiled for a classic, comforting taste. The other is cured, seasoned, smoked, and steamed for a bold, unforgettable bite. Two meats, one shared origin, and completely different personalities. And honestly, you can't go wrong with either. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.